Good afternoon, everyone, and aloha. Welcome to our last session of the day. Two new dorms, zero taxpayer dollars, University of Hawaii RISE and NOAA projects. And during this session, we'll be talking about two new dorms constructed for the University of Hawaii with no taxpayer dollars. I'm Dean Minakami, Executive Director of the Hawaii Housing Finance and Development Corporation, and I'm pleased to be here with Michael Lam, Lance Wilhelm, and Jared Everett today. I'll just give a brief introduction of our speakers. First, Michael Lam is the Senior Vice President for Hunt's Hawaii Division. Mr. Lam has been responsible for the development and management of many projects such as Ohui Manu, which is a 42,000 square foot neighborhood shopping center in Kilauea, Kauai. And he's also managing 530 acres at Kalailoa, the former Naval Air Station Barbers Point. Prior to his employment at Hunt, Mr. Lam was a Director of Investments with Alexander and Baldwin. Lance Wilhelm is the founder and president of the Wilhelm Group, LLC, which is a multidisciplinary development consultancy and construction management company. Through his work at the Wilhelm Group, Mr. Wilhelm has brought various real estate and construction entities together to work on impactful improvements to Hawaii, or to Hawaii's built landscape. Mr. Wilhelm has taken an active role in a multitude of industry and trade organizations, having served as a president of the General Contractors Association, the West Oahu Economic Development Association, and the Hawaii Developers Council. Mr. Wilhelm is a graduate of Kamehameha Schools, the University of Hawaii at Manoa. And Jared Everett is the Managing Director for University Partnerships for Greystar, where he leads the pursuit of transactions of on-campus development and acquisition opportunities. Jared previously worked at EDR, which is a nationwide company that develops, owns, and manages collegiate housing. He served in several capacities, including Treasurer and Executive Director of Real Estate and Business Development, managing a $500 million combined portfolio of investments, debt, and capital projects. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Lam, Mr. Wilhelm, and Mr. Everett as they discuss these two new dorm projects which were built without any direct government spending. So first up, we will have the RISE project presented by Mr. Lam and Mr. Wilhelm. So Mike and Lance.
Sure. Thank you, Dean. And thank you, Senator Chang and your office for putting together today's event. My name is Mike Lam. I'm with Hunt Development Group, and I'm based here in our Honolulu office and was also the project manager for the RISE project, which is now named the Walter Dodds Junior RISE Center. I'm also joined today by Lance Wilhelm, and his firm acted in various capacities throughout the project, even before construction, advising both ourselves and the UH Foundation on the project. RISE was brought to market via a public-private partnership between ourselves as a private partner and our public partners, the UH Foundation, who owns the land, as well as the University of Hawaii. We've put together a few slides today that we thought would be helpful for the audience to understand the project, describe the public-private partnership, and share with you the project timeline. RISE is a 120,000 square foot mixed-use live, learn, work facility consisting of a newly constructed 6-story student life building that you see here in gray that wraps around the pink building, which is a repurposed 1931 3-story building that will house the UH Foundation offices on the upper floors, with the ground floor serving as a projects lobby and home to the 4th location of local coffee shop Island Brew. The project is anchored on the 2nd floor with a 12,000 square foot academic classroom space that houses the university's Pacific Asian Center for Entrepreneurship, more commonly known as PACE. The space is both teaching classrooms, conference rooms, recording studios, and maker spaces, and was designed and programmed to further PACE's goal of educating entrepreneurial thinkers and problem solvers for the 21st century. The project is modeled after the successful Lasan Studio at the University of Utah, where classroom spaces and student residences are combined in one building and provide students not only the opportunity to easily access classrooms, labs, and lectures and guest speakers, but also provide housing for like-minded individuals who could take advantage of being in close proximity to each other spark discussions about different opportunities that they see in the marketplace or they see as students, or just general opportunities to kind of further the college experience. On the upper 4.5 floors are the 222 student residences that provide housing for 374 students. On each floor, there's a mix of singles and doubles. There's 14 singles and 34 doubles on each floor. The project has a combination of 65 singles and 154 doubles and singles that range from 120 to 125 square feet for the singles, and then for the doubles, between 140 and 195 square feet. On each floor, there's 2 kitchens, 18 bathrooms, and laundry facilities, as well as public and private spaces for students to take advantage of. As for the partnership, and Lance had a big role in putting together the RFP for the UH Foundation. When we received it, and we got to understand what the foundation wanted, which was the programming and the design and the uses that you see actually, or that I just presented on. We believe to kind of accomplish their goals, the structures as you see in front of you, the partnership structure that you see in front of you would be the most effective partnership to allow the foundation to have the project redeveloped with the type of uses they wanted to see with limited capital contribution. And so we propose, and I think this is similar to how Greystar is, they're in the similar capacity on their project, but we're in our role, we're the fee developer, where we provide services, developer services for a fee, and in return would be responsible for the design, entitlement, financing, and construction of the project. And in addition, we're required to secure the 501c3 owner as well as a private management company. At the completion of the project, we would turn the project over to the 501c3 owner to operate. And as the project evolved over time, the foundation actually stepped in as 501c3 owner. For the university as a public partner, they would have to not only provide an affiliation agreement that would allow the project, while private, still be marketed by the university as an alternative to its existing student housing projects, as well as have certain consistent services, including campus security, residence life, and even landscaping, so that to make the project look and feel like a university project. This affiliation agreement would enhance the credit of the project and assist in reducing borrowing costs. In addition to that, the university would also provide support in adding the site, which previously was not part of the UH campus, into the UH campus master plan that would allow us to build a 120,000 square foot project on the site that, without the upzoning, the existing zoning would only permit a 5,000 square foot single family dwelling. From awarding of the RFP to opening up the project for student move-in, the total project duration was a little less than 4.5 years, or 53 months. Construction itself took less than 22 months to complete. And while design and permitting took over 30 months and placed a significant amount of pressure on the project team, especially the public partners, as they bore the majority of the financial burden, if the project was not able to receive permit approval, which would have impacted our ability to secure financing. But however, with the help of a lot of individuals throughout the city and state in both public and private capacities, we were able to collectively complete the project in less than 4.5 years and open it on time and as promised this past August for the 2023 school year. The project was 95% leased on day one, and we expect Island Brew to open up next year. And with that, I thank you for your time, and I'll turn it back to Dean.
Thank you, Mike. Before we move on to Jared, is there anything you want to add, Lance?
No, I think Mike did a great job of putting that together. Appreciate that. A lot of emphasis here on the the tri-party way that this project came together. In some ways I used to call this a 4P, not a 3P, because there's the public, the private, and in this case, philanthropic entity, which would be the UH Hawaii Foundation, a separate independent 501c3 org in partnership. So Just because it's not complicated enough to do a 3P, we decided to do 4P at the end. So I think that's fair.
Okay. Thanks, Lance. Next, we'll hear from Jared Everett, who will talk about the NOAA project.
Yeah, great. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. So a little bit, appreciate the introduction. In addition to working for Greystar, which was acquired by EDR, prior to that, I was actually on the university side of these P3 transactions. I worked for Boise State University and Arizona State University. And so, have the benefit of kind of seeing these projects from both sides of the table. But a little bit about Greystar, you might not know us. We've been working in Hawaii for several years, mostly as a property manager with several thousand apartments under management. But beyond that, we're a global company in 241 markets, about 35 different countries. We have, almost 900,000 units of housing in our portfolio, and about 10% of that is student housing. And of that student housing, I would say about 50%, generally speaking, about 50% of that housing is done on campus in partnerships with universities. And the other 50% of that housing is off campus, fully privatized student housing. But we're really excited about this partnership that we have with the University of Hawaii. Unlike the RISE project, we just started construction, so we are not open. We can't provide occupancy rates or talk about the excitement we have of delivering it on time, on budget, and fully occupying the building. But we believe that will be the story that we'll be able to say a couple of years from now. The project is scheduled to be delivered for the summer of 2025. So a little bit about the project. It's 316 apartments. It is graduate student housing, but it will also be available to faculty and staff. Some of the goals of the university was to make sure that graduate students had a more affordable or attainable housing price point on campus, as well as the employees. The other benefit of providing more on-campus housing is, these 558 individuals who will live in this building, and more if some of the units are occupied by families. That's hundreds of vehicle trips each day that are off the roads in Honolulu, as these individuals will be able to work, live, and study all at the same location. So that's one of the benefits. So again, 558 beds, 316 units. The total cost was $144.6 million. That was the development hardened costs. There was also some cost of issuance for the public financing. The total building is 177,000 gross square feet. And again, we believe it will be delivered July of 2025 in time for the fall semester. In addition to the housing, there is a few other mixed uses in the project. There is a daycare that's going to be in the facility. It's about a 10,000 square foot daycare. It'll occupy a good portion of the first floor, as well as the required outdoor spaces. And then there'll also be at the far end, right off of Dole Street, there will be some retail spaces that serves not only as an amenity to the residents of the building, but also like the daycare, will be available to more than just the residents of the building. The actual tenant of that is to be determined. As we're just starting construction, we'll kind of actively start to lease that or pre-lease that, about a year from now. As Michael stated, so I don't have to do too much of the discussion, this is the org chart of the transaction structure. The University of Hawaii is certainly the landowner, remains the landowner. An important component here would be that in no way does the project financing encumber the land. The project's financing is really secured by the improvements and the improvements' ability to generate revenue. So the university, and therefore the state of Hawaii, has never put their land assets at risk for any of this project financing. So as the developer, like Michael stated, we're not the owners of the asset, so we're functioning as a third-party development. So we have a development we have a pre-development agreement with the university, but part of that pre-development agreement is that we will bring a foundation, a nonprofit foundation, who will be the borrower of record and own the assets for the duration of the ground lease. And then working with that foundation, we will ensure that the project financing occurs. And the foundation, as the owner, is ultimately responsible for the development and operations of the asset. But through our agreements with them, those responsibilities are a pass-through to Greystar as the developer. So we take on the responsibility to develop the project on behalf of the nonprofit. And once the building is delivered, we take on the responsibility to manage the property. So it's important, I think, in another way to note that while part of what we're talking about today is how to deliver housing in a unique model without using taxpayer funds, another benefit of the P3 model is during the duration of the ground lease, the responsibility to operate the facility is also transferred away from the public partner, which includes the deferred maintenance. If you were to look at, financial statements of various state agencies and look at the liabilities, the previous session kind of talked about that as well. A really large, I believe it was $750 million obligation for deferred maintenance to maintain existing assets. Under this model, during the duration of the ground lease, it's the responsibility of third parties to properly maintain and renew these facilities. And oftentimes these ground leases come with, at the termination, when the asset is returned to the university, it's not uncommon for those agreements to have some condition or standard in which the property is delivered back to the public entity so that the public entity enjoys additional useful life of the asset and receives it in a good operating standard. I think Michael kind of touched on this as well, but one of the ways that our structure differed a little bit from Hunt's was the university's foundation elected to be the 501c3 nonprofit owner of RISE, whereas in this transaction we brought an independent 501c3. In this instance, it was the Collegiate Housing Foundation, but there are a number of foundations that what we call traveling foundations, which in exchange for some fee to participate in the process, they are willing to take on the liability of the debt and be the owner. And there are many of these traveling foundations that, these ones, some are focused exclusively on student housing. Others have broader mandates for affordable housing or any type of government facility, such as courthouses, police stations, etc. But I won't go down that too much, as it's not the point of this discussion. But it is, I think, a unique point worth identifying, that if there are public entities out there that don't have an existing affiliation with the foundation, there are some traveling foundations that are willing to participate and facilitate these transactions. This one in particular that we used was from Alabama. I think that concludes my expected comments, but I look forward to the Q&A and participating further.
All right, thank you, Jared. We do have one question so far that was submitted, and this is from John Kawamoto. And the question is, it relates to the governor's housing proclamation, which, as you probably are aware, suspended a number of laws, including those relating to land use commission, environmental impact statements, SHPD approvals. So the question is, how much would your project did not use the proclamation because it was not in place at the time, but how much would it have expedited your projects? And I think they're referring to the original proclamation that suspended, the most regulations, which the current proclamation no longer does that.
I'll take a stab, and Michael Lam can correct me, but one of the more challenging aspects of the RISE project was around the refurbishment and reuse of the older Atherton historic building, and it also involved the demolition of an adjacent structure that was also over 50 years old. And so our Part of our processes for permit application, et cetera, involve a fairly extensive historic review of the building and doing HABs type studies and other kinds of historic architectural work. I'll be honest, I hesitate to say that this is not something that we would have otherwise done. I think prudent and reasonable redevelopment should include these kinds of processes. And so even with the proclamation in place, I'm not sure we wouldn't have done them anyway, because it's the appropriate thing to do. Having said that, there was definite time added to our schedule to meet some of the requirements, less so the actual work, the actual studies, the architectural reviews, archaeological studies, less so that, and more the time associated with applying, reviewing, and approvals, right? So that's the longer pole in the tent. The actual work in the field is not that impactful. Mike, would you disagree with that?
No, yeah, you hit it dead on. I don't have much to add. I mean, it really, yeah. I mean, the repurposing of the 1931 Charles A. Atherton House, that was definitely a bit of a challenge for all of us. But yeah, I mean, I think had it been in place, it would be interesting to see how much we would have saved. But you know, I go back to our last statement, and you know, there's quite a lot of people here in the city that we have to be very thankful that we were able to deliver the project in less than 4.5 years amongst, you know, both a COVID pandemic as well as the Ukraine war. So we, you know, we're very thankful of the support that we were able to get to get the project through.
Jared, do you have anything to add to this question?
Well, I mean, certainly those processes added time and cost to the project. But I think, but similar to Michael's comment, you know, we really appreciated all of the municipal authorities that helped us make this project happen. They were always taking our phone calls and really helping it move forward. But you know, whenever you add, you know, time, because time is also money in an inflationary environment. So whenever you add time and cost, you just have to be cognizant that ultimately those costs are a project cost, and ultimately these projects which don't have tax dollar support are being funded ultimately by the rents that are charged to the occupants. And so, you know, these processes, while important, you know, we just have to make sure that we're looking at them very cautiously, understanding that the tenants who live in the building are ultimately bearing the cost of those process. But again, it was a good process, and I'm always an advocate if there's an opportunity to maintain the public social protections, but accelerate and simplify the development process. I think it benefits the community.
Yeah, I think those are really good points, Jared. That's a great point in that, you know, unfortunately, with time, the ultimate, you know, the ultimate result is it has an impact on rentals and affordability. So, to the extent that, you know, our great partners in the, you know, in the different approval agencies can think of ways to help expedite housing, that would definitely be one way of reducing the cost of housing to the end user.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yes, I certainly agree that time does add to housing costs, whether it's a for sale or a rental project. It is a cost factor. It is a factor that adds to cost for housing in Hawaii. One more question that we have, and Mike, this is for you, and it's more along, I think it's more along the lines in your capacity at Hunt Development. The question is from a person who used to be an educator at Barbers Point Elementary School and is asking how many buildings there have been recommissioned into social housing or are being considered to be integrating into your housing plans? And will the homes that have cultural significance be protected?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for the question. Of the properties that we have right now, and you know, Kalaeloa, you could spend another a day on discussing in detail all the different opportunities and challenges we have in front of us. But of the existing buildings that we have been able to repurpose, and that is, we do need utilities, we do need roads to service them. And Jared's company helps manage some of the rental homes actually in Kalailo as well. But of those that have been able to repurpose and put back into the housing market, we have. And so those include 100 units at Wakea Garden Apartments, which are income restricted. We did repurpose the adjacent mezz hall to house a charter school that the Dream House Charter School actually now offers, I believe, sixth grade out of that facility. And then we were also able to repurpose what is now known as Kalailo Rental Homes, which Jared's group manages on behalf of their client after we've sold it. But those are single family homes that have been put back into the market. In terms of making sure that, I'm reading your question here, have many buildings been recommissioned? They have, yeah. And in terms of cultural heritage significance, we are in close contact with Uncle Shad and making sure that we are good community partners in making sure that whatever should be preserved, we're in lockstep with kind of the cultural and historical significance of the area. But right now there hasn't been a lot of the heavy lifting has been really in getting the area city and county utilities and roads. And so we've been able to jumpstart that with what we hope to, we don't hope because it will open in Q1 of next year, the new VA clinic, and then next to it, Gentry is rolling forward in building single family homes, I believe, as well as some townhomes. So hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, thank you, Mike. One more question. So are there state or county housing agencies asking how you did this? Is the concept of not using tax revenue to develop housing spreading? And as working for a housing development agency, I would say, yes, we are looking into this. So can you tell us what are the key factors that made your project successful? What was it? What were the elements that made it such that you did not require direct funding from the university? So maybe Mike and Jared, you can go first, or Jared, you want to go first?
Sure. I think, one, the student housing is not necessarily affordable housing in that it is not income restricted. So it's a little bit different than some things. So on the student housing side, one of the things that was important is that really you'd be able to drive two things. One, the setting of rents and making sure that rents are affordable, but at the same time supportive of construction costs. I think a lot of times when tax dollars need to come into these projects, it's because the expected rents aren't supportive of the construction costs. So there has to be some type of gap solution. And so, I want to, I think, maybe clarify that, when public dollars come into some of those affordable housing projects, it's not for the enrichment of a developer. Rather, it is to ensure that the rents stay at the level that the public entity wants. But for student housing, where we don't have those income restrictions, one, I think the developer needs some latitude in consultation with the university, or even directed by the university, to establish rents that are attainable, not necessarily capital A affordable, but attainable, but support that construction costs. I think the other thing that is important is to kind of take a look at operations. From a Greystar perspective, we have 900,000 units of housing in our portfolio. And with that, we try to bring those economies of scale of a global supply chain. So when we're negotiating our laundry contract or our trash contract, we're doing so with vendors who support us with hundreds of thousands of units, and we have a really good economies of scale. So I think part of the advice to these other agencies is get the full benefit of the private sector and those efficiencies. But at the same time, sit down with them and decide it is in everyone's best interest for someone to provide certain services for whoever can provide them best. And that's a little bit different on a university campus than it is maybe with the city. On a university campus, they might have an existing elevator contract or crash contract. They might be doing landscaping. So we always kind of sit down and say, here's how much it's going to cost us to do landscaping. If we were to pay the university to do it, how much would it cost? And we pick the best value. So I just think, public agencies should view these as true partnerships. And in true partnerships, you work together to achieve the goals. And if those goals are to provide these social assets and minimize public investment, then let that guide the structure.
Okay, thank you, Jared. Mike or Lance, want to add anything?
Mike? Mike remains on mute. Okay, so I will say, people have asked how did you do it? I really actually hope more people would ask, because I do think that when Hunt and UH and the foundation and we all started on this journey, and it is a bit of a journey, that it was a stated objective of ours to create a model that others could follow. So yes, we wanted to create student housing. Yes, we wanted to support the university. Yes, we wanted to support the foundation and its own income production objectives. But we also wanted to create a model that others could follow. And so I would say, yes, people have asked, and we hope more do. I think we really encourage that. And if you see a friendly relationship between Mike and myself, I'd like to say that is not a small part of it. That these projects require that people, real human beings, be able to sit across a table, work together collaboratively. You need to have that. It's not a agency to corporation relationship. It's a people to people relationship, and you have to forge those relationships and work on those. And if you're lucky and you work hard at it and you're all done, you can still be friends, which I like to think that Mike and I are friends, and that's not by accident. That's a lot of work on both our parts, I think.
Now, I have one follow-up question relating to this. Jared, you said it was important that you're able to set the rents to cover costs. So just generally, what is the rent for the dorm rooms?
Well, it's a little bit different in that these aren't traditional dormitory rooms, and that they are full kitchen apartments. So I want to make that distinction. But the studios are about the most expensive, and they're about $1,800 a month, or actually maybe $1,500, some of them. And then when the 2-bedroom units, we rent those by the bed, and so it just continues to go down after that. But certainly there are rentals certainly well below that. We have a mix of studios, 1s, 2s, and even some 4-bedroom units. So the 4-bedroom units are the most affordable because you're renting by the bed.
Okay. All right. Thank you for explaining that.
Yeah, but the important thing is, when we went about setting those rents, we actually hired an independent third party who did a student survey. So they asked these students, where are you living right now? How much are you paying? And what's included in that rent? And then that survey continued to say, here's a theoretical project on campus near Dole Street. Here's what we're thinking of building. Here's what we think the unit type is. If you were to live here, what type of rent would you be willing to pay? So we kind of did two things. One, we looked at what is the competitive rent set off campus, and we targeted to be below the off-campus rents, because graduate students and employees tend to rent in the off-campus market. But we also did this survey of students that said, graduate students, how much would you pay to live here and what is your preferred unit type? And we did that before we designed the building so that the program that you see in the building actually reflects the percentage of unit types that the graduate students wanted, and the rents reflect what the students were willing to pay so that we had adequate demand for all of those unit types. So whether the rents are, $900 a month or $1,500 a month, those were all determined by student preference surveys saying what they would be willing to pay for that type of a unit.
We have a question that came in of what is the per bed rent?
That'll take me a second to bring it up because we have 4 different units and each unit has a different average rent. I would need to calculate an average rent there, but I can if there's any follow-up materials to the participants, I can certainly provide that.
Okay, we can try to get back to this person. I guess, these are great models for student housing. Could they be applied to just regular workforce housing if there are state lands that were made available to you folks? Like for Jared, you have complete living units. Could it work for that, and at what AMI target level?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So we're actually working on some of these. For us, there's to hit the affordability targets that you want, you have to kind of take advantage of certain structural benefits. Like in some instances, it's property tax exemptions by having the units rent restricted, but also tax exempt bonds provides the lowest cost of capital. I would have loved to invest equity at the University of Hawaii, but that equity has a equity style return, and tax exempt bonds is much less. So first of all, it's important that when you think about your projects that you're able to kind of preserve those types of benefits if you want below market rents. Otherwise, by definition, if you're paying market rate everything, the rents need to be market rate. So we have to find relief, and where we find relief is either those public incentives like property taxes or lower cost of capital through tax exempt bonds. But a lot of what we're working on in various states is what we call the missing middle. Greystar is not a significant player in capital A affordable or LIHTC housing. There are other firms that really specialize in that, and that's not a space that we have moved into. But one area that we're really focused on is what we call the missing middle housing. The missing middle is where this is your teachers, K through 12, your firefighters, your policemen. They're making enough money to not qualify for LIHTC housing, but they're not making enough money to live in these high cost urban areas and the communities they serve. So we're really taking a hard look at that, and we're working on some projects where we can preserve these types of public benefits. LIHTC credits aside, we can't get those, but the property tax exemptions, the tax exempt bonds, and lower cost of capital, we can actually execute on that for this missing middle. In some instances, the AMI can be up to 120% or even sometimes more. You have to be careful. I mean, it's not really demonstrating public goodwill to have an entire project be 120% AMI, or maybe people disagree. Feel free to disagree. This is not my expertise. But that type of level actually preserves some of this public benefit. In other jurisdictions, the person's employment classification provides that benefit. So we work in some states where if you're an employee of a nonprofit hospital, the city, the state, whatever, regardless of your income, the fact that you are an employee of a nonprofit, there are some benefits to provide housing for those nonprofit employees. And so that's not something that I've thoroughly examined in Hawaii, but we see other states extending those same type of public housing benefits to employees of nonprofits, regardless of income. And so yes, I do think that this model that we're using for student housing with these foundations, be it affiliated foundations or existing Hawaii authorities or traveling foundations, I think this is portable for both affordable housing and the missing middle workforce housing.
Okay, thank you, Jared. Mike or Lance, do you have anything to add? Your project was different, I know. Your adaptive reuse of a historic building, so it wasn't new construction.
Yeah, I mean, I think I do think it's a solution. We in a community like ours where we're land rich but community resource constrained, it does help with the capital stack. If you look at Rise, it was built on almost less than an acre. Multiply that like at $200 a foot, which is probably being very conservative. I think it could probably be a little bit north of that. That's removing $8 or $9 million out of the capital stack there. So that definitely helps. Coupling it together with some of the other financing instruments out there, I think could make it a very attractive solution to our housing challenge here. And I will say that we have had a few visitors from the university system come and take a look at the project and see if it's a model for them, even from the neighbor islands. And I know Senator Chang has brought through a contingent as well. So people are looking at it. I think Lance is right. We set out to try to be a solution to the issue here locally. We definitely we're open book. We encourage people to come in and see if it's something that they would like to pursue for their own projects.
And Dean, you and I've talked about this. We're trying to take a look at projects that have sort of, to Jared's point, a focus on, say, teacher housing or elements. Like, are there opportunities to leverage DOE properties or other state assets and try to use those levers as a jumping off point for a lower cost housing option and getting down to a place where you don't have to subsidize with any taxpayer dollars?
Sure, Lance, that's really important. I mean, finding housing solutions for the missing middle, I think, is top of mind for many people. LIHTC housing, for those not familiar with LIHTC housing, that's the federal government's primary source of affordable housing, and it's for households that's 60% AMI and below, which is great. It helps up many households, but it doesn't really benefit folks like teachers, nurses, your firefighters, because they make too much to benefit from those programs. They still need housing, and they don't earn enough to really purchase a house maybe on their own. So there are other solutions needed. So it's good to hear about the work that you folks are doing. I think we have time for maybe one more question. And let's just talk a little bit about pre-development risk and how that was managed for your projects. I know that's a large part of P3 projects. So can you just explain how risk was allocated between you folks and the university? And I believe that was instrumental in making these projects go forward.
I'll just make a quick comment. Mike has a lot of information on this in this regard, but it is, I think, one of the critical elements in P3 development. People want to turn to it as a panacea for all the problems. The reality is there is this really significant risk that somebody has to take around the pre-development activity, all the expenses associated with it, and the risk of the project not being able to go forward. And in many cases, for no reason of any of the parties participating. There's things that could change in the environment or the marketplace or interest rates or things that we just have to react to. So at Rise, it really was a really long and ongoing discussion, negotiation, trying to be very clear about who's taking what risk, where and when, so that both the private side, the public side, recognize that. The key thing, and I think we talked about this earlier in preparation, that you will take risk, right? So the public side has to take some risk as well. There is no such thing as no risk here. The key is understanding what that risk is, being transparent about it, and owning that so you can manage it. That was a word, a lot of words. But Mike, you can give your perspective.
First of all, Lance, I don't think it was that long. I mean, come on, it's pretty interesting. But I will say, you know, everyone, Jared, Lance, myself, every group who gets into these agreements, the goal is to get past pre-con. I mean, that is not the issue, you know, and that's we're in it to finish it. We want to be a solution to, you know, address some of the issues we have. And ultimately, what's really sad is when it actually doesn't get to fruition, we aren't able to get to financial close. Ultimately, you know, our community suffers. So I think that's what we go into it. Obviously, I think Lance has pointed out very clearly that there's a lot of risk the public side does take, you know, in terms of pre-con, because if we're not able to reach financial close, a lot of the financial burden does lie on the public side. But, you know, you're relying on picking your private partner to be able to get you past pre-con and vertical, and obviously to delivery.
Thank you. Jared, do you have anything to add?
I think Lance and Michael characterized it very well. I think the only thing that I would add is when we talk about the risk that's going to the public sector, I think part of the P3 process and part of the P3 benefit is that the public entity does have the ability to ensure that, or should have the ability to have the private developer cap that risk that the public partner has taken. So it's at least defined, and the public partner knows, you know, what they're signing up for, and it's not necessarily an unlimited or ambiguous commitment.
Okay. And well, we actually are over time, but we'll take one more question. Which groups opposed your efforts, and how do you respond to them? Did
Well,
you face any opposition?
Yeah, from
For
our
projects?
perspective, you know, I think we went and built on the edges of the UH Manoa campus, and actually, in order to achieve our entitlement, had to sort of redraw the boundary around what is defined as the University of Hawaii campus. So, our one of our bigger risks had to do with our engagement with the neighboring community and to get the buy-in for the project that we were going to build in their neighborhood. And it is one of the places that I give Mike and the Hunt team a lot of credit. They put in a lot of effort discussing open dialogue with community, so much so that when we went to a Manoa neighborhood board that is kind of notoriously difficult on new development, that they were very much supportive of our project, and in fact overwhelmingly voted to support it at the neighborhood board level. And that doesn't just happen. That's a lot of work on behalf of the team to get you know, educate and inform the neighboring public. So for us, that was one of the bigger obstacles, I think.
Okay, great. Yeah, community outreach is very important. Jared, did you have any opposition to your project? Looks like Jared is frozen. Okay, well, we are out of time. So thank you, Senator Chang, for inviting all of us to your housing conference. It's been a great day of learning all about the different types of housing solutions. So thank you, Lance, Mike, and Jared, for your participation. I will look forward to talking to you later.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Aloha.